Maurice Ravel is a bit of a controversial figure. Most people knew him as cold, sarcastic, and emotionally restrained, a sharp-tongued dandy. But to those he truly valued, he could be surprisingly warm and full-hearted. He probably could be a great father as kids adored him, but he was so obsessed with his shortness and unstable artist status, and so afraid of prosaic dangers of marriage that he never married. He made a proposal once, however, but got a rejection, according to his student Manuel Rosenthal. He was also full of contradictions in music. Take his stylistic preferences, for example. His close friend Ricardo Viñas once witnessed Ravel crying and weeping while listening to the prelude from Wagner's Tristan und Isolde, and Ravel admitted that it happened to him every time he listened to this piece, which is of course understandable. I also almost cry each time I listen to it. But on the other hand, a painter and music enthusiast, Jacques-Émile Blanche, recalled that when they were about to sight-read some duos together, Ravel insisted on skipping Beethoven, Schumann, Wagner, and all the other romantics, as he said. He wanted to play only Mozart and Rameau. That's why this project didn't happen. So while romantic music could sometimes break through the impeccable defenses of his persona and touch something really deep in his soul, there was another side of him that wanted nothing to do with the whole romantic aesthetic. Yes, composers like Liszt, or especially the Russian romantics like Borodin, Mussorgsky, and Rimsky-Korsakov, definitely influenced Ravel. In my video on Scarbo, you can see that Ravel paid a noticeable tribute to Balakirev's Islamey. But the way he used those influences was very different. For Ravel, music wasn't primarily a tool for expressing raw inner emotion, the way it was for most romantics, which often tend to milk each phrase for an orgasmic emotional effect, as one of my subscriber once wrote about the Russian school pianist. And this is a common stereotype, and kind of true, probably. He used emotional expression only when it served a specific idea or narrative. Take Zhdanov, for example. That piece doesn't really express a mood or a personal feeling. It paints a picture. The shimmering textures and harmonic colors are like musical brush strokes, imitating water. So while the music might stir emotions in us as listeners, that wasn't the driving force behind its creation. In that sense, Ravel was more of a musical impressionist or even a symbolist, someone who uses sound to explore color, atmosphere, and abstract ideas. Emotion was just one color on his palette, not the whole canvas. By the way, I am happy to announce that I have a new course on Jus d'eau, in addition to courses on Ondine and Scarbo by Maurice Ravel, so check them out following the link in the description. Of course, there are works where the romantic influence is clearer, like the Noble Valses, which seem to nod to Schumann's Carnival or Papillons. So I'd say Ravel had a kind of love-hate relationship with Romanticism. And that's part what makes him so fascinating. This inner tug-of-war adds layers of complexity to his music and his personality. But it's also why some people find his music less emotionally fulfilling. I remember one Russian pianist telling me, "You know, Denis, I prefer Rachmaninoff. Ravel feels cold. I never get that emotional satisfaction." And honestly, I get that. Of course, most of us, we come to appreciate classical music through accessible genres like Rachmaninoff's Second Concerto, for example. And I have a special video and a course dedicated to this concerto if you are interested. But here's the thing, musical taste can and should evolve. Learning to appreciate new styles, even ones that don't hit you emotionally right away, helps you develop a richer musical sensibility. So you start noticing nuances, details, subtle beauty you didn't hear before. That process is called growing. And Ravel was really known for his ability to appreciate smaller, seemingly insignificant things which most people wouldn't even pay attention to. Now, this idea of resisting romanticization is super important when it comes to interpreting Ravel. Of course, we should aim for sincerity and beauty, but at the same time, we shouldn't play Ravel like romantic music, not even the pieces that are directly influenced by romantics. Unlike Debussy, actually, where you can sometimes get away with a bit of sentimental, cheesy playing, if you really want to do that lang thing. chords is kind of too cheesy, but it's not such a big crime in Debussy. But Ravel's music demands more discipline. For the sake of our inner truth, I believe that each artist must develop an idea of the world a composer inhabited, what kind of spirit they were. For example, some people feel passion in Scriabin's music and interpret his works in an overly sensual or even erotic way. Even using corresponding body language and attire, and I'm not a moral purist, by all means. My most favorite pianist of all times is, of course, glorious Lola Astanova. Just don't tell my wife, please. But the problem is that this distorts the essence of music, because late Scriabin had moved far beyond primal human instincts into realms of mysticism and pure symbolism. Even his early works cannot be played with raw sensuality, because that isn't Scriabin. It turns into a mockery or caricature of Scriabin. In reality, Scriabin was intensely restrained and uncomfortable with overt sensuality. For instance, if he saw a female dancer showing even a little bit of bare skin around the foot, he would be visibly disturbed and say how inappropriate it was. So the true spirit of his music is born when you feel the passion, but transformed. It's not a raw animal emotion, but a fire that has been transmuted into something spiritual and creative. That's where his genius lies, not in indulgence, but in sublimation. By the way, if you are a true Scriabinoid, we have courses on late Scriabin sonatas taught by my wife, who is already a world-class expert in Scriabin's music, so check them out. So let's get back to Ravel. Before you stretch a phrase or add a sensual ritardando at the end of the section, think twice, and then think again. Take Zhdanov, for example. A lot of students play it like Chopin, slowing down freely, changing the tempos between sections, using rubato at will, and that might wow a general audience, but in a serious competition or audition to a serious conservatory, it's a sure way to get knocked out, simply because it will be considered out of style. What helps is to develop a strong sense of inner pulse in Ravel's music. Bolero is the obvious example. That obsessive rhythm keeps going no matter what. But even in works like Alborada del Grazioso or Judo, you can feel that steady, vibrant flow of 8th and 16th notes. That pulse is your anchor. It helps you avoid what I jokingly call the Mendelssohnification of everything, where every piece is turned into some sort of romantic cheesy daydream. And here's a key difference. In romantic music, we tend to think in long-breathed phrases. A phrase needs to breathe, to expand and contract. But in pre-romantic and post-romantic music, think Mozart, Bach, Scarlatti, or later Ravel, Prokofiev, Gershwin, Stravinsky, and even modern composers like Carl Wijn, for example, we often focus on motifs, smaller rhythmic cells, and pulsations of the 16th and 8th notes. The musical logic comes from small units and their consistent pulse, instead of just emotional arcs and waves. So when working on Bach or Ravel, think of quantum physics. Imagine smallest particles, vibrations of the electrons. Your task is to actively experience those smaller 8th, 16th, and even 32nd notes pulsations, feeling that those smaller pulsations, you have to feel them in your body. They have to manifest your inner reality. Then you can get a level of articulation needed for non-romantic style. I hope that was interesting. Thank you for watching this and see you next time.